Greetings, beloved Princeton United Methodist Church community. It's Pastor Jenny here with an update for you, and I'm reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. This is the word of life. Thanks be to God. I was preparing for a youth group session years ago, and I remember talking with our youth staff, our youth leaders, the adults who were working with the youth, and I was talking with them about this verse, about doing everything we do to the glory of God. So when we're studying, to know that, because when we're talking with lots of kids, when we're studying, or then we are both learning about God and God's world and God's people, but we're also doing it to honor our mind, to love God with our mind, and on. We talked about a variety of different things, and I remember that somebody's eyes got really big and was like, whoa, that is heavy, that's big, that's huge. Something clicked for that person in this moment, but it was not a click that immediately was happy, that immediately was joyful. It was rather overwhelming. But part of what we're doing, we're wrapping up our Contagious Joy worship series this coming week, and we're talking about joy as flourishing. And I think this verse sums it up so well. Being able to practice joy. Remember, we've continued to say joy is not just a feeling. It's not just about our circumstances. It is something that we are created for. It is something that we are imbued with by the Holy Spirit. It is something that Jesus practiced, and we get to follow in the way of joy. But it is also something that is about being fully present, seeing God in the places that we are fully present, in all the things that we are doing in our lives, making these deeper connections between the life and the personhood that God gives each of us, our belovedness, our enoughness, and discovering that infuses everything, that informs everything, that is the basis for everything. Sometimes I like this illustration too, that we have this idea that we live life kind of sliced up, that we have this part for work, and we have this part for our family, and we have this part for recreation and fun, and this part for our spiritual lives. And maybe that slicing up our lives works okay in some ways, but when it comes to our spiritual life, I invite us to see the pie crust as our spiritual life, the thing that undergirds and holds it all together, that is this sweet taste underneath everything. When we are able to notice God's presence, when we're in whatever it is we're doing, when we're able to discover that God is there already, when we are able to savor and delight in the things in our life, because God is there, because God has created this marvelous world, God has created us for marvelous, joyful things, then we can delight in God's delight of us, and joy kind of starts springing forth more readily for us. So that was a lot of things. So I think if I could sum it up this way, I would say, when we can receive God's yes for us, God's yes, God's belovedness for us, when we can say yes back, and not just at church, but in everything we do, we discover that we can do it for God's glory, but also that God is there in it, delighting in our delight, in those things that we love, with us in those things that are troubling or challenging or hard or hurtful or painful, noticing that God has set us free to receive those yeses, to give those yeses back to God, that God has created us for joy, then it can start to free up in us more and more and more. And we discover not only is that pie crust there, but it is full of God's presence, and it is full of joy. contagious joy that is palpable to others around us too. So I invite you to just consider these images. What do you do for the glory of God? What is it that you kind of hold back that isn't very God-connected at all? Again, not out of judgment, but just out of observing, noticing, where do these things come together in our lives? And where is there some separation? Where do we kind of keep God out or think God isn't? Where do we find joy in life? And where could it be because God is there in part of these things already? Friends, as I said, we're wrapping up our Contagious Joy worship series this week. Through the rest of the summer, we'll be just looking at lectionary. I'll explain more about what that is next week. Remember, too, that we have our hymn sing before worship every week for the next couple of months. We'll start worship about 10 minutes early, or 10 minutes before worship is another way to say it. If you're in person with us, you can request a hymn, the favorite hymn, on the spot. There's also a way that you can fill out a little form, a request form, and we can put that in our log. And if you are remote or aren't sure you're going to be there every week, you can certainly request a hymn that way too. We've had a very busy couple of months. I know that people are in and out for various things, but know that we have a lot of good things planned in worship together and continuing to immerse ourselves in joy and God's delight. So blessings upon your journey. I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. I am so glad to be starting my 5th year with you this week. And I want you to know once again, to hear one more time, you are enough. We are enough because God is enough. Thanks be to God for that.